Now, as South Africa celebrates 30 years of democracy this year, we look back at what the country has achieved. The empowerment of women has been one of the greatest achievements, and South Africa had its first deputy president in 2005. Dr Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, who became the first deputy president, went further to occupy the senior position at the United Nations when she was appointed the executive director of the UN Women. Now, international news editor Sophie Mokoena spoke to Dr Mlambo Ngcuka about her achievements and challenges facing women.
What has propelled me was just the desire to serve. And when I was presented with opportunities, I grabbed them with both hands. As you know, many of the areas that I have worked in are not the areas that I necessarily had planned to end up in, but whenever there was an opportunity that presented itself and it made sense and it provided me an opportunity to serve a community in a meaningful way, I took it with both hands.
When you became the ED of UN Women, it was not easy. There were people even attempting to block you from occupying that position. That's how difficult it is for women.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it did remind me of the time when I started as a deputy president, which was also not the most friendly environment, but I just told myself I have to keep my eyes on the ball. The people of South Africa expect to be served, and that really has to be my priority. Anything else is just noise. When I got to UN Women and found that people who were even not necessarily even close to the situation had concerns about my appointment and wanted even to intervene, I just closed the noise and just focused on the work. I think the important thing for all of us, and for women in particular, it is to remember that when we are given an assignment, you cannot waste your time belaboring things that are on the side. You have a job. Some people will congratulate you. Some people won't. And it shouldn't really create major problems for you. Just focus on the work and not pay too much attention on who doesn't like you. That's not really important.
Let's talk about leadership in general. It looks like we have regressed, particularly on the continent. We only have one woman who is the president. In Tanzania, there was a time where we had two. Much as we have one in Ethiopia, she doesn't have executive powers. Where did we go wrong?
Well, I mean, even when we had two, it was not a lot to really be very proud of. So ending up in one was always something you could imagine would happen. I think fundamentally, patriarchy is still very strong, and the possibilities for women to occupy the most senior position in any country remain very difficult, notwithstanding that in most countries, women are the majority of voters and they vote in every election. And I think as women, we really have to be talking amongst ourselves about how our vote is being used, whether it supports what we believe in, whether we can make any demands because of the vote that we bring into any election. So yes, I think that as women, we really have to talk amongst ourselves because nobody is going to do this for us.
Let's look at around the world. We have a challenge in Ukraine, Middle East, Sudan, the DRC. It looks like in relation to areas where you have these pockets of conflict, women are again struggling?
Well, in every conflict in the world, women and children are the majority of those who suffer. We used to say in UN Women, the majority of people who die in any war is not those that are wearing the combat uniform. It is civilians, and the majority of whom are women and children. So you are right, Sophie. Even in these countries that we're talking about, the people that are in the line of fire are women, and it is a concern that we have not been able to protect women adequately from the shootings. In Gaza, for instance, as you know, the majority of those who die are women. So yes, it is absolutely a concern.
Let's talk about young women. One thing that you really focused on during your leadership at the UN Women, you were trying to build a strong support system for young women. But when you look at the reports in South Africa as we speak, teenage pregnancy is quite rife. And that is linked to gender-based violence. Are we doing enough as communities, particularly the leadership, to deal with this problem?
The attention to the issue of gender-based violence has increased, and we've seen leadership up to the president paying attention to this issue. But unfortunately, we are still seeing an increase, which means that we have to do more. Whatever we are doing is not adequate. The pregnancy of girls below the ages of 19, in fact, below the ages of 15 in South Africa is actually quite worrying. What is also most worrying is that at least I haven't seen enough focus on accountability in order for us to deter those who abuse girls, because many of the girls who get pregnant do not choose to be pregnant. Many of them are forced into relationships that they're not ready for. Many of the fathers of these children are much older men who do not take responsibility as fathers, but also who are also, in a way, they are rapists. It is a statutory rape for many of the children who have given birth before they are even 16 years old. So I would really like to call on all women in South Africa that we really focus on checking what is happening to these fathers. If we have so many girls that are pregnant, where are the fathers? What has happened to those fathers? Why are these girls left carrying the baby just by themselves and their parents? This leads to poverty for the child, the newly born child, and the child who is a mother. So we recreate the next generation of poor people by not paying attention to this issue and making sure that we do everything to deter this kind of behavior. And also, if an older person impregnates a girl, it is a crime. This has to be reflected in this person's criminal record, so that we know, even when you employ them, that this is a person who has committed that crime, and you can decide if you really want this person in your place of work. But more than anything else, they must take responsibility and make sure that this child has got what it needs to grow up in a healthy and a proper environment.
Talking about this leading to poverty cycle, I just saw a report that in Nigeria, children who are out of school, that country, in terms of UNICEF report, is leading globally. That's another problem that leads to cycle of poverty, because the whole country will be doomed in terms of its future. How do we deal with that to ensure that children who are supposed to be at school are indeed at school?
I really think that we should not punish these children just because they have had children prematurely. I think it is important for them to go back to school after birth. It is important for us as society to find a way of looking after their children and making sure that they can go back to school, because now they already have a responsibility in their hands. To leave them out of schools and just leave them to depend on a grant, that will definitely not give them the best life possible, certainly not the best life for them and their child. So in a situation like Nigeria, I would think that it would be very important that an intervention is made in order to make sure that these young mothers go back to schools and they get their second chance.